see. So
Okay,
I had already planned today to talk, last couple of weeks, we've talked about God's plan and how things that seem like they're disasters turn out to be the plan. You can see that. But I've also been here before, and there are people who will say, are you saying that when my grandmother got sick, that was God that made her sick to teach someone a lesson? And no, I'm not saying that now or ever. There are times where it, I think, is obvious to us, but there are other times that we see, and this has been one of those weeks. So I had someone a couple of days ago ask me to pray for their nephew. He's a 6-year-old boy, and those of you who have pen and paper, you might write a name down. His name is Jacob Ringenbach, and it's only been a few months ago he was healthy and a normal 6-year-old boy. Not that he's not normal, but everything was fine. He wrecked his bicycle. He went in and they took imaging, and he's got a medulla blastoma, and it is wrapped around his brain, and they can't do anything, and they have sent him home to just discontinue treatment. They say there's nothing they can do, and she's the person telling me this said that he's seemingly more at peace with it, obviously, than the rest of the family, and they're hoping at the very least that this is a peaceful transition. Excuse me. It's hard at times when we talk about a plan and then we see things and say, how is this a plan? So keep the family as well as Jacob Ringenbach in your prayers.
Hey, Scott.
Yes, sir.
How do you pronounce this last one? How do you spell it?
Ring,
R-I-N-G,
Ring, E-N-B-A-C-H, Ringenbach. And the family will absolutely need strength. The mother is not given over yet to hope, and maybe that there's some treatment, and there are at times. And so we don't want to forget that. But certainly what the person who talked to me, and she doesn't know you, but she knows that we pray. And she said that it's, what they hope is that if this is the way it's going to be, that it be gentle.
Hey, Scott, James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. The heading is testing of your faith.
Yes.
Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and that steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So I'll only tell you this because in November of this past year, I got re-diagnosed with a recurrent renal cancer after 17 years. And obviously the first question is what?
Yes.
And the second is why? And when this was in San Antonio, where I go to see the gentleman that did the first surgery. And then when I was coming home, I don't know, the question was not why, but why not? Because things happen.
Right.
And, I think it's, in my point of view, at least, when I looked at and saw this particular verse, and I know there's other places in scriptures where when things happen to us, it's an opportunity for God's glory to manifest itself.
It is.
So, yes, I understand what you're saying, that this might be a different case, especially if it's that way for this young child, but
It's not different, Mario. It is what I want to be sure and avoid. I have been in places where the pastor talks like, well, it's easy. You just trust. And one of the reasons that we study, one of the reasons that we learn is because we prepare for times like this. What do you tell a family and I don't know that you can prepare for this anyway. These are the times that you're right, they test us. And we're even told that you have to keep an eye on that. And you're going to be tested, but I don't ever want to leave the impression that we're saying God's playing games with someone saying, you need to be tested, so I'm going to do this to you. We go through this. There is a system to this place, and it works, and it's beautiful, but it's not always the thing we want. So,
And it's not always easy.
and it's certainly not easy.
Scott?
Yes.
Terry, both Cindy Duck and Terry Biomonte were wanted to say something.
Oh, they want to say, well, unmute yourself.
Naya's up there.
No.
No.
Oh,
okay.
Naya, okay,
All right.
there we go.
All right.
Sorry, thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is one of those times, and if someone has something to say, we want to hear it. But we'll pray. God, we see these words you've left for us, and we see your plan, your hand in this world, and we know that our job is to trust and to follow and to do our part. And yet at other times we see things and we don't understand. We maybe have audacity to say, I don't understand the plan, and so it must not be good. And we know it's good, but it's also difficult. We ask for your hand on this family and on this boy, and we don't concede that you don't have the reason or the ability to cause miracles, things that we can't understand. And yet, if this is the way it's to be, we ask for your hand on these family, on the little boy, on Jacob, for peace, for strength, for understanding that you are in control and that it is always good. Sometimes just not in the short run. We know that. And we know that the peaceful end, if that's it, is something that you can do for them and for us. We still have others in our circle that we're concerned about. Gene, we ask for continued hand on him, and we're thankful that he's been able to come back. Julie Compion this week with surgery, with a hip replacement, knee replacement, and we see healing. We're thankful for these people that you bring into our lives. Phil and Cherie, you know how hard that is, you know our concern. And we ask the same thing, the strength, the patience, the peace. And we ask that with us, that when we see these things, that we're continually reminded to turn to you and not to try and logic them out ourselves. And that's what we ask as we go into study today, that we see your words and your purpose. Amen.
Oh, sorry, someone else is here. I am not doing good today. There we go. Okay. Admit. We are on week 10 of Jacob. We think we have a couple more weeks of Jacob. Where did we leave off? We left off where the brothers were going to bring Benjamin back to Egypt at his request. And we got to see Jacob again back into the story. And Jacob loaded his sons up with some gifts to soften up Joseph, just like he did when he was coming back to Canaan, and he softened up his brother Esau. So Jacob was back in the picture. And we left off in chapter 43 of Genesis, and we pick up in verse 16. When Joseph saw Benjamin with his brothers, he said to the steward of his house, "Take these men to my house, slaughter an animal and prepare it, for they shall dine with me at noon." The men did as Joseph had commanded and took the brothers to Joseph's house. But the brothers were frightened that they had been taken to Joseph's house. "We have been brought here because of the silver that was returned in our bags the first time," they said. "They intend to overpower us and take us as slaves along with our donkeys."
So keep in mind, and I've told you over, I guess, a couple of weeks, I'm going to try to persuade you that Joseph understands what his place in this plan is, and he's sort of manipulating things. He knows that he needs to get his family down from Canaan into Egypt. And you're going to see more evidence of that. It's not just based on one or two things. But what he did was, if you remember, they took the grain, they paid for grain, and then he had the steward, and keep in mind, he told the steward, give them the grain and then put their silver back in the mouth of their bags to take with them. And they find it and they think, oh my gosh, we've been accused of being spies. Now we're going to be accused of being thieves, that they don't have the silver that we brought. And when they come back with Benjamin, Joseph says, take them to my house. Well, you can imagine these are shepherds from Canaan, and this is the effective ruler of Egypt. They don't get invited to his personal dwelling, and they think he's going to make a spectacle of us. He's going to kill us.
Or at least put as slaves.
As
Yeah.
slaves, yeah. They think they're in trouble, and with good reason. And you also see, though, their guilt, and you're going to see their guilt come out several times through this. They said earlier that this is because of what we did to Joseph when we sold him into slavery.
And remember, this guilt, selling him into slavery happened 20 years ago. So they've been living with this guilt of what they did to their brother, who they think is dead, remember. So they approached Joseph's, yes.
I still don't know where you are.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're in Genesis 43, and now I'm on verse 19.
Thank you.
So they approached Joseph's steward and spoke to him at the entrance to the house. Please, sir, they said, we really did come down here the first time to buy food. But when we came to the place we lodged for the night, we opened our sacks, and behold, each of us found his silver in the mouth of the sack. It was the full amount of our silver, and we have brought it back with us. We have brought back additional silver with us to buy food. We do not know who put our silver in our sacks. It is fine, said the steward. Do not be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, gave you the treasure that was in your sacks. I received your silver. Then he brought Simeon out to them, and the stewards took them into Joseph's house, gave them water to wash their feet, and provided food for their donkeys.
So in this, one of the things you need to see is when you only know half the story. They only know half the story right now. And from their perspective, they're constantly worried that they're in trouble, right? The silver was a big deal, and they're scared. And Joseph, on the other hand, knows the whole story. And he told the steward to give their money back to them. He knew what that would do. And so they think before Joseph shows up, they're going to cover their bases. They brought back the silver from the first trip and the silver for this trip. They said, look, we don't know how it got in there, but we brought it back to you. And we also have silver to pay for grain this time.
And they haven't said this yet, but they also have gifts to give to them. They've got everything covered.
And look at what the steward says. He goes, oh no, and you know Joseph has coached him. Joseph told him to put the silver back the first time. And you know Joseph told him what to say. He says, oh no, it was your God who put the silver in your sack. I got your silver, okay? You don't have any problem. I got yours. So that stuff that was in your bag belongs to you.
So the steward's in on this too.
The steward's in on it because Joseph clearly has told him what to do. And they're just puzzled. I mean, from their perspective, they don't understand what's going on here. And he says, you know, I got your silver. That came from your God. Well, Joseph has done this to make them mindful that God is working in this situation. And it's not as elaborate maybe as it sounds. He's working a plan. And I think you can say that God guided him in you know, how to get them down. The last thing, and I'm going to try not to do this too much, but the last thing to keep in mind, if they had known, I said this last week, but if they had known that Joseph was there, he was the one running things, they would have been too scared to even come because they sold him into slavery. And then once they were there, if they had known that it was Joseph, and he said, go back and get your father and your brother, they would have never come back because they would have been too scared. They know what they've done. That's right. Mario says this. Yes, that's exactly right. So he can't just come right out and announce who he is. If he does, they're gone. There's no way they'll think, oh my gosh, he's going to want vengeance. And I want you to notice what the steward tells them, and pay attention to how often you hear these words in the Bible. The steward tells him, don't worry about the silver. I got your silver. Don't be afraid. Fear not. What does the angel tell the shepherds? What does he tell Mary? It's over and over through the Bible, we get this message from God or his representatives. Don't be afraid. Fear not. And it's a big message for us.
Since the brothers had been told that they were going to eat a meal there, they prepared their gift for Joseph's arrival at noon. When Joseph came home, they presented him with the gifts that they had brought, and they bowed to the ground before him. He asked if they were well, and then he asked, how is your elderly father you told me about? Is he still alive? Your servant, our father is well, they answered. He is still alive. And they bowed down to honor him. When Joseph looked up and saw his brother Benjamin, his own mother's son, he asked, is this your youngest brother, the one you told me about? Then he declared, may God be gracious to you, my son. Joseph hurried out because he was moved to tears for his brother, and he went to a private room to weep. Then he washed his face and came back. Regaining his composure, he said, serve the meal.
So for starters, again, their perspective, here's this guy, and not only are they in his house, but he says, how's your elderly father? Remember, he'd been told they have this elderly father. How is he? And the fact that he's asking about their dad is, it's amazing to them. And it says, they tell him, yeah, he's still, well, Joseph is asking about his own father. Is he still alive? He has, he kind of hopes and he's kind of worried that he might have died. And they said, no, he's still alive. And they bowed down to honor him. The idea of being flattered like that by the ruler is kind of it's an amazing thing. And then
you have to remember that the vision way back when that caused Joseph all this problem that ended up there was when he told his brothers that a vision that looked like they were going to bow down to him. And here it is 20 years later, and they are 22 years later now, they're bowing down to him.
You're right. And you're absolutely right. We see that come literally to fruition of them bowing down. And then of course he sees his younger brother Benjamin, and this is the one you told me about. We don't know for sure if he ever really met Benjamin. People argue about the timeline, but Benjamin would have been a very small infant,
or 2 or 3 at the very oldest.
at the very oldest, 2 or 3 by the time. So he would not recognize Benjamin. He's barely seen him. And so he says this, and he's overwhelmed with seeing this younger brother who is his, the son of his mother also, the only 2 that were born to Rachel. And he's overcome enough that he's choked up and he has to leave the room.
So now they're serving the meal. They separately served Joseph, his brothers, and the Egyptians. They ate separately because the Egyptians would not eat with the Hebrews, since that was detestable to them. They were seated before Joseph in order by age, from the firstborn to the youngest, and the men looked at one another in astonishment. When the portions were served to them from Joseph's table, Benjamin's portion was 5 times larger than any of the others. So they feasted and drank freely with Joseph.
So it's really important what he says about they seated them separately. Joseph is at his own table. The brothers are at their table, somewhere nearby, but the Egyptians won't eat at the same table with the Hebrews.
Even with Joseph.
They find them detestable. And, we think so. They married him off to an Egyptian, but in this situation, they're not going to eat with Hebrews. Now, later on, we get on the Pharisees a lot. because they won't eat with Gentiles. They won't eat with tax collectors. And we do. I mean, they get hammered for it. It is not unique to the Jewish hierarchy to say these people are detestable. These people are not worthy to even eat at a table with us. There's an image here that we are supposed to get of them. The Egyptians will serve you the meal, and you can eat from our goods, but we're not going to sit at a table with you because you're Hebrews. And that just, gets repeated. The only difference I would say is later when the Pharisees behaved this way, they were supposed to know better. That's what makes them doing it even worse. But you have this image of Joseph having this lavish table set and his brothers seated at a separate table, probably in front of him. I don't know, but probably. But what's going to happen is they're going to be served food from Joseph's table. So it's this image of they're eating from the king's table, effectively the king, the ruler, and it's being passed down to them from the king's own table. And it's an honor to say, we're not bringing you some of the day-old bread we have in the kitchen. You're eating the same thing the king eats. This is an honor.
And Benjamin, he serves them 5 servings.
He gives Benjamin 5 times as much. Now, Benjamin can't eat 5 times as much as his brothers. Clearly, Benjamin doesn't need 5 times as much, but they know there's something going on here. He is honoring this youngest brother even more. And what I really hope is you can just put yourself in their place.
These 11 brothers.
What's going on? You want to say something?
No, I was saying, it's like the favoritism again all over again.
It is kind of like the favoritism, and maybe that's another good lesson, is that we are still human beings. This is the idea that this is my full brother instead of my half brother.
And this is my favorite brother.
we do those things, and we do have a tendency to say there may be somebody begging on the side of the road, and I'll give you $5, but I wouldn't invite you home to sit at my table with me. This is maybe not as strange as you think.
Chapter 44. Then Joseph instructed his steward, fill the men's sack with as much food as they can carry, and put each one's silver in the mouth of a sack. Put my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, along with the silver for his grain. So the steward did as Joseph had instructed. At daybreak, the men were sent on their way with their donkeys. They had not gone far from the city when Joseph told the steward, pursue the men at once, and when you overtake them, ask, why have you repaid good with evil? Is this not the cup my master drinks from and uses with divination? What you have done is wicked. When the steward overtook them, he relayed these words to them. Why does my lord say these things? They asked. Your servant could not possibly do such a thing. We even brought back to you from the land of Canaan the silver we found in the mouths of our sacks. Why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If any of your servants is found to have it, he must die, and the rest of us become slaves of my lord.
So we left something out of the last section. We didn't mention when they were seated at the table.
Oh yeah.
Joseph seats them in age order, and he gets it right. And statistically impossible. I don't care if one of them looks a little older than the other. You're not going to get that exactly right. And they are amazed. And we're told that again for a reason, because what they assume is that this man knows stuff. Either he's very wise or he has some magic ability to know things that he couldn't possibly know because of this. And that's what that bit is about, seating them in age order. So then when they leave, they're going back. Obviously, he gives them all the grain, but he takes his own personal silver goblet and has the steward put it in Benjamin's sack.
Along with once again, the silver.
All the silver is back, but now it's Joseph's personal goblet. It's like one of the possessions of the king. It would be, you know.
And he says he uses it for divination.
And I'm not sure if he did that or if it's just the story that's, so they're supposed to think Joseph knows things. Joseph divines things. So I don't really know. I mean, because we're not given any detail, but what I do know is that the brothers are led to believe that you can't fool this guy. You can't fool him. He knows what age order you're in. He knew that you stole his goblet. Why did you repay his goodness with evil? And as soon as they get a little ways out of town, Joseph sends the steward and I'm sure some soldiers to run them down. Do you remember back when Jacob was leaving his father-in-law Laban with his wives and his family? Do you remember that Rachel stole the family idols?
And put them in her camel
And put
bag.
them in her sack, her saddlebag, and they rode them down. They chased them down and they caught up with them and they said, hey, you stole from me. And Jacob says, nobody here stole from you. And he really believes it. Nobody here stole from you. And I'll tell you what, you can go search. And if you find your stuff among my stuff, whoever took it shall die. He was that confident in what he was saying, and he didn't know that Rachel had actually stolen them. Well, in this case, it is a repetition. This time, Joseph has his people write them down, accuse them of stealing. And of course, the brothers say, if you find it, we wouldn't steal from you. We actually brought the silver back, remember? We paid you this time. If you find a silver goblet among our stuff, the person who stole it will die. Does that sound familiar? He doesn't know. Joseph already knows because he had the goblet put in the sack. This is going to get dicey, and it's done by design. He's going to put them on the defensive for a reason.
Chapter 44, verse 10. As you say, replied the steward, but only the one who is found with the cup will be my slave, and the rest of you shall be free of blame. So each one quickly lowered his sack to the ground and opened it. The steward searched, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest. The cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they all tore their clothes, loaded their donkeys, and returned to the city. When Judah and his brothers arrived at Joseph's house, he was still there, and they fell to the ground before him. What is this deed you have done? Joseph declared. Do you not know that a man like me can surely divine the truth?
Let's stop right there. So keep in mind what I'm trying to convince you of, that Joseph's goal is to get his whole family down to Egypt. And he knows the connection, the attachment that Jacob has for Benjamin. That's his youngest. And that's the thing that will bring Jacob down to Egypt. Remember, Jacob has been told this land up in Canaan, that's theirs. That's what that's their gift from God. And he's been told that
By God.
by God, this is your place. And he's not going to leave it easily or willingly. Plus, he is really, really old. He's
130.
130. So even at that, he's just not going to leave. But Joseph thinks he'll come for Benjamin. If I set this up right, he'll come for Benjamin. And so he sets it up. And when the brother says, if anybody has your silver goblet, you search. And if it's there, the person who stole your goblet shall die. It was probably not wise. But notice what the steward does. He says, the rest of you, I don't care about. Whoever has the goblet is the one that will become a slave. So he's walked back the death thing. You see that, not I'm going to kill because you said so. He'll become a slave. And he knows already that it's Benjamin. Joseph wants Benjamin to stay in Egypt. And so they search, they find the goblet in Benjamin's pack. And you can just see the brothers like, oh no, they tear their clothes. It's a sign of grief. And they get back on their donkeys and they go back into, the capital there in Egypt. We're in trouble and we have really, really blown it this time.
And Joseph's last words were, do you not know that a man like me can surely divine the truth? So that's why that cup was, he said it was for divination,
He's establishing this idea,
that he knows
you
everything.
you can't fool me. I know everything. I can find out anything.
Verse 16, what can we say to my Lord? Judah replied, how can we plead? How can we justify ourselves? God has exposed the inequity of your servants. We are now my Lord's slaves, both we and the one who was found with the cup. But Joseph replied, far be it from me to do this. The man who was found with the cup will be my slave. The rest of you may return to your father in peace. Then Judah approached Joseph and said, sir, please let your servant speak personally to my Lord. Do not be angry with your servant, for you are equal to the Pharaoh himself. May my Lord ask his servants, do you have a father or a brother? And we answered, we have an elderly father and a younger brother, the child of his old age. The boy's brother is dead. He is the only one of his mother's sons left, and his father loves him. Then you told your servants, bring him down to me so that I can see him for myself. So we said to my Lord, the boy cannot leave his father. If he were to leave, his father would die. But you said to your servants, unless your younger brother comes down with you, you will not see my face again. Now, when we returned to your servant, my father, we relayed your words to him. Then our father said, go back and buy us some food. But we answered, we cannot go down there unless our younger brother goes with us. So if our younger brother is not with us, we cannot see the man. And your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. When one of them was gone, I said, surely he has been torn to pieces, and I have not seen him since. Now, if you also take this one from me and harm comes to him, you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow. So if the boy is not with us when I return to your servant, and if my father, whose life is wrapped up in the boy's life, sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. Then your servants will have brought the gray hair of your servant, our father, down to Sheol in sorrow. Indeed, your servant guaranteed the boy's safety to my father, saying, if I do not return him to you, I will bring the guilt before you, my father, all my life. Now, please let your servant stay here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy. Let him return with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father without the boy? I could not bear to see the misery that would overwhelm him. So remember, Judah was the last person to convince his father. They were trying to convince his father to let Benjamin go. And Judah came up to his father and said, anything happens to Benjamin, it'll be on me. So now Judah is going to Joseph, retelling that whole story. It's sort of confusing how you read it.
He retells it. But what he says is, look, this boy, we didn't want to bring him here. Remember? We didn't bring him the first time. He belongs with my father, and my father didn't want to let him go, but you insisted. We couldn't buy any more grain from you unless we brought him, and we would have starved to death. So he finally said, fine, but if anything happens to this boy, it'll kill me. That'll be it. It'll bring me down to Sheol, which is the grave, the place of the dead. It'll bring me to my grave from sorrow. And he says, I promised my dad I would bring him home safe. And if this happens, it'll kill him. And I gave my dad the guarantee that I would sacrifice myself. I would, guarantee him with my own life. And that's what I'm offering. Take me, don't take this boy. It'll kill my dad. And so he's trying to convince him, you'll have that on your head. You will have killed my dad. The boy's not the problem. Keep me. And it is the first of these signs of sacrificial love, if you will, of being willing to sacrifice oneself for someone else. And he said that to his dad, and he meant it. He was as good as his word. The reason that I've tried to tell you that this is Joseph's plan is because there are people who say that this was a test. This was a test of the brothers to see if they had changed, okay? And it sounds, it's too easy for us to accept that idea because that's what we do. We're not going to help somebody unless we're convinced they've changed. I'm not going to forgive you unless you personally say, I'm sorry. What would have happened? Joseph knows that he's there to bring his family down and have them live there. What would have happened if he determines that the brothers haven't changed? Would he have said, well, fine, go back up there and starve? There is obviously not. That's not the plan. Joseph was not saying, I'm going to test you. And if you look out for Benjamin, then I'm going to save you. And if you don't do what I think you should, I'm going to cast you off. It's an image that we see repeated, and we need to keep in mind that to receive this salvation that has been laid out for us, and these people are the forerunners of Messiah, that if we had to be good enough to earn forgiveness, we'd be in trouble. Impossible is exactly right. And what you're seeing from this, if those brothers had to prove that they had changed before Joseph would help them, the indication is that if he doesn't like their response, he's going to cast them off and just let them die. That's not the model. Joseph is absolutely doing this on purpose with the intention of setting a situation up that will bring his father down to Egypt and the rest of the family.
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
The other thing in the whole, like Mary said, in the whole explanation that Judah gives Joseph, but he also says, and not only does he go explaining about how Jacob feels about Benjamin, but he reminds him that Benjamin had a brother who was lost.
That's a very good point, Mario, and you're right. I should have said that, but he, in this story that he tells Joseph, he mentions that Benjamin had a brother and he's dead. He's been, and that his father was so torn up. These guys are still carrying tremendous guilt. I mean, a lot of guilt over the fact that they were going to kill him and they sold him into slavery, and he may well have died already, but he's lost to them and they're carrying guilt. And we will see that come up again too.
Chapter 45, then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, send everyone away from me. No, so none of them were with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. But he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household soon heard of it. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But they were unable to answer them because they were terrified in his presence. When Joseph said to his brothers, please come near me, and they did so. I am Joseph, your brother, he said, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves that you sold me into this place, because it was to save lives that God sent me before you. For the famine has covered the land these 2 years, and there will be 5 more years without plowing or harvesting. God sent me before you to preserve you as a remnant on the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God, who has made me a father to Pharaoh, Lord of all his household and ruler over all the land of Egypt.
So the bunch of amazing stuff in there, but when Judah does this and says, keep me, don't keep Benjamin, take me, and you'll kill my father, Joseph finally can't take it anymore, and he's overcome, and he sends everybody else away. He sends the Egyptians, all the guards. He says, leave, and it's just him and his brothers, and he weeps. And it says he weeps so loudly that the household hears it. And it tells us that the Egyptians became aware of it.
The Pharaoh's household.
The Pharaoh's household became aware of it. So word gets around that their leader is weeping. Probably not a good look for most people that if they expect their rulers, if you're a king, you don't have to weep. You don't have to feel bad about anything. And so word gets back, but he weeps and he tells them, I'm your brother, Joseph. I have no doubt that he said that in Hebrew. That would have been a clue. They would have said, wait a minute, what? And it said they couldn't even respond. They were too puzzled. Mary and I went out one time for, was it Mother's Day? We went to visit your parents in California, and we showed up unannounced.
It was a surprise.
My
mother was very elderly at the time.
And she was, and we walked in the front door, and I thought we might have killed her mother. I really did. I thought she was going to just fall, and I said, oh, we have done a bad thing here. That's where these brothers are. When he says, I'm Joseph, it just won't sink in. And he tells them again, please come near. And you just have to picture this thing of going, I don't get all that's going on here, but they see the truth in it. And he tells them, you can see now clearly that I'm the one speaking to you is Joseph. I'm your brother.
And then he sets out to tell them, don't feel bad for selling me. There was a bigger purpose.
And that is maybe the crux of all of this, is Joseph understands this is God's plan. And he knows the brothers are carrying guilt. He's heard them talk about it. And he says, don't feel bad. Imagine being in that spot. They chunk you in a pit, and they tell that you can hear him saying, we're going to kill him. And then they say, well, we'll throw him down in here, maybe he'll just die. And then they pull you out and sell you to a caravan to be sold into slavery. How many of us would hold a grudge? I come
even if things turned out well, people still hold a grudge. I might be in a good place now, but I still don't like you.
Yeah. And I come from the world heavyweight champion of grudge holders. So it comes easily to me to do that. And Joseph says, don't feel bad. Don't beat yourselves up. This was God's plan. He sent me here ahead of you to prepare this place, to be ready when this happens. This is God's plan. And he knows them. He knows the first thing that's gonna come to their mind is, oh my gosh, we tried to kill him. We sold him. The guilt that would come out, and he's going to look, there's no need for that. There's no time for that. This was God's plan. And what you did, I think you read that part, but he says, what you did to me for evil was actually for good. It was what had to happen. This is an amazing scene, and it is a model for us without question, if we're wise enough to look at it and say, first of all, see God's plan, look for it.
Verse 9, now return quickly to my father and tell him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me Lord of all of Egypt. Come down to me without delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen and be near me, you and your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds and everything you own. And there I will provide for you, because there will be 5 more years of famine. Otherwise, you and your household and everything you own will come to destitution. Behold, you and my brother Benjamin can see that I, Joseph, am the one speaking with you. Tell my father about all my splendor in Egypt and everything you have seen, and bring him down here quickly. Then Joseph threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin wept as they embraced. Joseph kissed each of his brothers as he wept over them, and afterwards his brothers talked with him.
So I think it looks like the plan was going to be to keep Benjamin as if I'm keeping him as a slave. You guys go back up there, and if your dad wants him back, tell him to come here and get him himself. I mean, I think that's the plan, but he just couldn't stand it. He couldn't keep this up anymore. And he just, this is who go get dad. Tell him about everything that you've seen. Tell him I'm the guy here in Egypt. I'm running things. And God did this to preserve us, not to harm us. And if there's going to be 5 more years of this horrible famine. If you guys stay up there, you're all going to die. And they know that Joseph gets, things revealed from God. I mean, he's telling the truth. Go up there, tell him there's a great place, but I also want you to notice, he tells them, you're going to live in this place called Goshen. And Goshen is this lush place where the Egyptians, where the Pharaoh keeps his cattle. It's a perfect place to run cattle. And he's already telling them, you're going to live in this place called Goshen. And it's going to be great. Just go get dad and have him bring all your animals and all the family, bring them all and come here to live.
Verse 16, when the news reached Pharaoh's house that Joseph's brothers had come, Pharaoh and his servants were pleased. Pharaoh said to Joseph, tell your brothers, do as follows, load your animals and return to the land of Canaan. Then bring your father and your families and return to me, and I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you shall eat from the fat of the land. You are also directed to tell them, take wagons from the land of Egypt for your young children and your wives, and bring your father and come back. But pay no regard to your belongings, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours. So the sons of Israel did as they were told. Joseph gave them wagons as Pharaoh had instructed, and also gave them provisions for their journey. He gave new garments to each of them, but to Benjamin he gave 300 shekels of silver and 5 sets of clothes. And he sent to his father the following: 10 donkeys loaded with the best of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and provisions for his father's journey. Then Joseph sent his brothers on their way as they were leaving, he said to them, do not quarrel on the way.
Yeah. So
Isn't that, you realize the Bible really is written in human form. As Scott says, they're going to get out of town and they're going to say, it was your fault, we got caught. You just hear it. And Joseph knows it's going to happen. Do not quarrel on your way. I just think that, I just underlined that. It's so funny to me.
don't beat yourselves up. And I've had to go through that with people that you want to tell them, look, I'm over it. In fact, I had to do it this last week. I don't even think about it anymore. Just let go. And people will often continue to beat themselves up. But what happens is word gets back to Pharaoh. People hear what's going on. And Pharaoh says, Joseph, you have a family? Well, you never talk about them. We didn't know this is your family. Oh my gosh. And we love Joseph. Look, any family of Joseph's is a friend of ours. Go back and get all your family and bring them all down here. Just bring them all. And I'm not even going to give you my personal wagons so you can bring the old people and the children. And he said, just
Don't even bring your stuff.
go get them and bring them here. You're Joseph's family. And he says that, let me see if I can get back to what I was going to say. He tells them not only that, that's right, go get your dad and the rest of your family, but tell him, don't even bother packing all your stuff. Okay. Like the Beverly Hillbillies. Don't do that. There's so much, I've got so much stuff. I'll give you new stuff. Don't bring the dishes. We'll give you new dishes. Just come here with us and share in our bounty. Pharaoh is feeling very magnanimous because they have grain stored up like no one's ever had before. And there's a famine. And he recognizes what Joseph has done. He is now wealthier than he ever could have been without Joseph. So it's not hard to do this, but the idea of saying just pack yourselves. I'm going to send you enough food for both directions, and I'm going to give you wagons so you can come back in a hurry. Leave the stuff, get new stuff when you get here.
Verse 25. So the brothers went up out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. Joseph is still alive, they said, and he is ruler over all of Egypt. So Jacob was stunned, for he did not believe them. However, when they relayed all that Joseph had told them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him back, the spirit of their father Jacob was revived. Enough, declared Israel, my son Joseph is still alive. I will go to see him before I die.
And there it is. Once Jacob hears that, we're heading to Egypt. Nothing is going to keep me. Now that I know my son is alive, nothing is going to keep me from going there to see him before I die.
Two
Now-
things here that are sort of question marks. One is it says, the boys told him, however, they relayed all that Joseph had told them. I always wondered, did they tell him that they put him in a well? Did they tell him what their part in this was? Or did they just say, hey, he wasn't eaten by animals and he ended up in Egypt? I don't know if they did true confessions or not.
Turns out somehow he got out of the hole
Yeah.
and wound up in Egypt. Who knew? Yeah.
And then the other thing is that, keep in mind, remember that that Jacob had been renamed Israel, and after he wrestled with God or the angel. And so once again, in some of these things that if you weren't studying this, you would miss it. So he says, Joseph says that, and then declared Israel. That's the same person. Jacob and Israel are the same person, and they go back and forth.
And it does go back and forth. And I've looked for some logic behind why it switches from Jacob to Israel. And there's not a rule that holds. It just does. We don't have time to really start another section, I don't think, because do you?
But just this first part, because then we
Okay.
go into all those names. I
Right.
think we're okay. So Israel set out with all that he had, and when he came to Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to God of his father Isaac, to the God of his father Isaac. That night, God spoke to Israel in a vision. Jacob, Jacob, he said. Here I am, replied Jacob. I am God, he said, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you a great nation there. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will surely bring you back. And Joseph's own hand will close your eyes. Then Jacob departed from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel took their father Jacob in the wagons Pharaoh had sent to carry him, along with their children and wives. They also took the livestock and possessions they had acquired in the land of Canaan, and Jacob and all his offspring went to Egypt.
So we'll start at the end. You remember Pharaoh told him, don't even bother with all your stuff. Jacob's not leaving his stuff. There's no way. So the first thing is he takes all of his stuff.
He took the dishes.
We're taking the crumbs, whatever it is, we're taking it with us. But they leave, and it says he was stunned, and you can imagine at first he doesn't want to, he just can't absorb the idea that Joseph is still alive. But once he is, they're off, and they load up their stuff, and he stops in Beersheba. That's where he had been raised up. And he offers sacrifices. And that night he has a vision. God comes to him. Is it a dream? Is it a vision? He comes to him at night, so you figure he's probably asleep. But he says, calls him by name, Jacob. And he says, yeah, I'm here. He says, what's the first thing he tells him? Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to go down to Egypt. That repeats itself over and over again. And, often we are, we're motivated. We don't always step out and do the things God has for us because we're afraid. What if I don't measure up? What if something goes wrong? What if? And he says, don't be afraid. Now, Jacob is already going, but he tells him, I will go with you. I will be with you. When he went to Haran, remember all that time ago? God says, it appears to him in a vision. He says, I'm going to go with you and I'm going to come back with you. I'm going to watch over you the whole time you're there. And later, when they're building a temple, when David is preparing and then Solomon builds the temple, they want to build a place for God to live. And they have this idea that they're going to contain God in a building, and they get corrected. You know, at one point he says, when you were nomads, wasn't I always with you? When you were in tents and traveling around, didn't I always go with you? And here this is, I'm not contained in a building. That's not what a church is. That's not what a temple is. I've always gone with you. He says, I'm going to go with you to Egypt. And he says, and it's kind of a funny reference. He's talking about his people, and I will bring you back. And it doesn't mean he's going to bring Jacob back, because Jacob is going to die there. But he does bring the people back, yes? And he says, and this is a beautiful thing, your own son Joseph will close your eyes. And that means when you die, you're going to be with this son Joseph that you have missed, and he is going to be there with you at the end, and he'll close your eyes.
Oh, the other important thing here, he says, do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation
There it is.
there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll make you into a great nation there. Now, here's the next thing I'm going to try and persuade you of over the last week or two of this. All of this family, the forerunners of Messiah, are living in Canaan, and that's their land. But they're intermingling, they're intermarrying with the locals, and they're also under constant threat. They have to watch their backs because these people together could ride down and wipe them out. By moving them down to Egypt, they get, and I will have to skip ahead, I'm not going to talk about it, but they go to this place called Goshen, and the Egyptians leave them alone there. The Egyptians don't want to associate with a bunch of shepherds. It says so. And so they wind up without the influences, without the threats, without all the problems, and they have this lush land, and they expand. And it says, I will make you a great nation there. They've been told they're going to be a great nation, but he says, this is where you're going to become a great nation.
And I will bring you back.
And then I will bring you back. And just for the record, they do bring his bones back, but that's not what this is about. But he makes them a great nation in a place that is designed for that. And it never would have happened. It never could have happened any other way. It is the most amazing plan and we'll talk about it the next week or two, and you'll see this come to fruition. But this is the dream. And the big thing is, he says, I know I told you that this was your land. And I know part of you know, Jacob has to think, am I doing the right thing leaving? When we remember to do it, question. We start to go for some new plan in our life, some new stage. And we wonder, is this what God wants us to do? Or is it not? How do I know? You know, give me a sign, do something. That's how we think. We worry about those things. Am I doing the right thing by packing up and leaving? And he's given Jacob this assurance. This is my plan. I'm with you. I'll be with you. You're going to become the great nation that I've promised, and I'll bring everybody back here. You're going to wind up here just like I promised, but it's going to come later. And it is an amazing assurance that we get here at the end of this.
And we are at time.
Okay.
10:01.
God, sometimes I know we think we'd love to have proof, we'd love to have a sign. This seems so easy, and yet it's not easy. And we have your assurance that you're with us, that you'll bring us to the place that we need to be. And our job is to have the faith. Our job is to have the trust, and it's difficult, and we know it. And these words that you leave for us help with that. if I could ask anything, is that we would at least remember to ask, to seek your will as we make these decisions. And then trust that you guide us in the ways that you speak to us, and it's different for each of us. Remind us of that. Remind us to look at least for your will in our big plans for our own lives. These ones that we've prayed for, especially the Ringenbach family, this stays on our mind. We don't understand, but we're bold enough to ask for your hand in this. And the ability to see your will, your plan in it. As always, be with us. We're thankful for this gift of each other, but we also know that we have that same gift to bring to other people outside of this small circle. Help us do that. Help us remember. Amen.
Yeah. Guys, can unmute yourself. Good morning, Naya. Sorry it took me a long time to bring you in.
Oh, there's a chat.
No problem. Yeah, no, thanks. That was fast. Thanks.
You got
Good morning to you all.
they send me texts, so.
Aw, well, thank you all for this morning.
Well, it's good to see you. We have about 6 messages in a chat, and I think what you're supposed to do when you're doing Zoom is to have people who experiencing intermittent sound.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
that was just Louise, not everybody.
Oh,
was,
okay.
so, okay.
Anyway, well, you're supposed to have somebody who monitors the chat and tells you all this stuff, and it's just really hard.
Is that
to-
my fault?
No, it's not. That's a problem. So I'm just saying, I'm sorry that, you know, we don't always see those.
You guys are busy.
We do.
Be a producer here.
All of you guys have a great week and happy Father's Day for those fathers. Enjoy.
Yeah, Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day.
Day.
Happy Father's Day.